Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another Lockdown Live on this lovely Sunday afternoon. Right, so let's get things started. I'm going to be chatting to Clifford and Maryke Roberts, and the two of them are writers. I've actually had Maryke on as one of the first guests in the first week when everything was still on Instagram, so that interview couldn't be saved, unfortunately. But yes, so now I've asked her if Clifford would like to join her as well, because the two of them are quite a mean team with this kind of stuff. Clifford writes a lot about small breweries, distilleries, wine, all those kind of things. So I think that could be a very interesting topic, especially in the times that we are in now. So right, let's get them to come on. And please don't forget to ask any questions. Right, I'm just waiting for them to come onto this thing. Technically, this should be our last week of level 5 lockdown. So then we will see what's going to happen after that. From Friday, I believe we're going to level 4. And here by us, it means that we've got a little bit more room to move. We can buy stuff that's non-essential, still can't buy alcohol. So yeah, right. Yes, Clifford and Maryke. Hello.
Hello.
Geez, like I wouldn't share all that so widely because people might be coming to Radio House.
We're not going to tell them where we live here in Stellenbosch.
But this is our pension plan.
So is all the bottles sealed if it's still a pension plan?
This is empty.
Sadly, that's empty.
But the rest are all sealed, yeah. And
no,
by the minute, the price is going up.
Oh my word! How's it going?
Good, thank you very much. Yeah, good. We're making a living. And with you?
Oh, well, it's carrying on. It's tough times for all photographers. But yeah, no, it's going to be interesting time ahead. I see that the guys are posting in the photography groups. I'm not sure if you've got any of that kind of stuff with your writing. Everybody's asking when they can work again. But even if they can start working tomorrow, who's going to be paying for it? Because nobody's got money.
That's a problem.
That's true, but it's a temporary situation, and obviously everybody must be able to look. It's great if you've got some savings or something that you can fall back on that can just carry you on. But you know, the bottom line is a lot of these needs that people had before lockdown still exist.
Yeah.
So you need to just find ways to satisfy them, and they are there, but you need to figure it out. And yeah, as you say, you need to find a way to kind of sustain yourself until you can kind of really get off the ground.
Yeah.
But it's also depending on talking photography wise, what you what you are shooting. If you're going to be shooting, if you're a wedding photographer only, you are stuffed. If you only shoot families, if you only shoot babies,
Yeah.
babies are still a bit tough, but families, you might be able to work around it because you can shoot with a longer lens. You don't have to stand on top of them, all those kind of things. There is still ways to work around that. But if you are shooting more and like the kind of stuff that we've worked together on, I think we should be okay for now.
Yeah.
We won't be able to work yet, but we are okay going forward, I think.
I think it's a very interesting time to look at what you are offering and different ways of how you can present that. And I think what was so in the last 2 weeks for us, since you and I had our last chat, is how just by calming down, I think the initial panic has started to settle a little bit, and by calming down and looking at your offering, how you can adapt. And I think you just said, if you're just shooting weddings or just, there are needs, people have needs for other things as well. And if you're a photographer and you've got the skill and the equipment, you can supply in those needs. So I think this is a time for seeing what you can offer in a different way.
I had a post in one of the photography groups last night, and well, there's people that are asking, when can I shoot, and why can't we be classified as professional services? Which is stupid. And I said to them, well, the first thing that you must ask yourself, what this lockdown has taught you, is that to diversify your photography. And then the second thing is how to earn a second income from photography, not having to deal with clients, being, call it a passive income. And then I almost said it, it's not by selling your presets or your workshops or stuff like that, because every second wedding photographer is now selling a workshop or a preset, but the people he's marketing to, none of them have got a single cent to spend on these things. So you're back to square one. It's yeah, they must figure out. And then I also asked, how many of you or how many of them actually did something creative, played around with new techniques at home, fiddled around to find something that they could show off a different skill in their photography that might be able to let them stand out when everything is lifted. And I can tell you now, 99% of them didn't do anything.
Yeah.
But that is the thing. There's a fantastic book that came out last week, I think, called How to Virus-Proof Your Business, How to Virus-Proof Your Small Business. And it's a South African guy that wrote it, and it's a 60-page book, sells for 90 Rand. It's an ebook.
Yeah.
But it's extremely, the nice thing about it is that it's a really positive book. I suppose, he has to be, because he's got to sell his book.
Yeah.
But it has very real ideas about things to look at in your business, things to try, questions to ask yourself. But one of the main points that he says is that movement is life. He says these top elite special forces teams are taught, that's one of the things that they taught, is that if you stand still, you're going to die. Yeah. So you need to, it's better to make a few mistakes along the way, because that's not fatal, but standing still is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is you need to be cultivating ideas, and they might not bring in money now, but when the money is there, suddenly you've found a new avenue, you've found a new skill, you've changed, maybe you've changed the complete direction of what you were doing. So I think it's just important to work at it,
And what have you guys read in that book that you're thinking of implementing for your own business?
I can tell you this. I'm going to answer your question in a different way. I told somebody this morning, I think what is very important, I think everybody must read the book, because it has tips for specific sectors and specific sizes and shapes of business. But what was important for me as a small business owner is every one of us have a right to be worried, but a right to fight for our business. And we have to fight for our businesses. And he said in some chapter, you're keeping a little economy alive with your business, whether it's only the fact that you maybe have somebody helping in your house with cleaning or a gardener, but you're paying rates and taxes, you're putting petrol in your car, you're buying food and cleaning products. You are a little economy. So the fact that you are giving a service, delivering a service to clients is the reason why you're going. And the fact that you are making a living means that your services are in demand. But we must never think that my small business has a less reason or is not allowed or not as important as the next one. We all have a place and we all form part of a bigger economy. And for me,
I mean, if I can just quickly chip in here, I think some of the things that we are implementing in our business and that he raises in the book is we've suddenly discovered that we have access to publications that need content, but have had to completely re-engineer their content plans. You know, they plan months in ahead, and suddenly none of that content is valid anymore, and they need to fill these pages very quickly, and they don't have enough ideas, and they don't have enough people to satisfy those needs. So we've suddenly found that we're building relationships with publications that we never had before.
Okay, that's
because
good.
we're supplying to their content requirements. I'm also finding that we are playing a larger role in a lot of the copywriting businesses that we write, the businesses that we write for as copywriters, because everybody is looking for advice, and I think everybody is looking for positive reinforcement. So I think that we are able to build out our reputation with those clients to kind of, or make a tighter relationship, because suddenly we are helping them fight something for our mutual survival. And that's what this all is about. It's about mutual survival. So I think those relationships are going to last a lot longer after this is gone, because you've really built, you've strengthened that relationship. So, I mean, those are a couple of small ways, but I mean, there are things like we've been watching a program about, accommodation, about fixing up your accommodation. We've got an Airbnb. So there's a program called Stay Here on Netflix, I think. And we've been taking furious notes about how to improve the attractiveness of these. So suddenly we're looking at other ways of improving our income streams. That, the Airbnb always used to be kind of in the background and you never used to put much focus. Now you have time to kind of sort out and zone in on those things to really build them up. You're kind of, what was a side hustle is now your main thing.
Like in my case, I had all these things I wanted to do, and I started with this thing, and this has been keeping me busy like every single day. And it's
brilliant.
I'm thinking, shit, I wanted to do that. I still want to. I need to paint my office. And I just can't get to it, because as soon as this is done, I do all the captions on a YouTube. Once that is done, I transfer the audio recording to Dropbox, which I then pull into Final Cut, and I render out the podcasting. I upload that. I download the video from YouTube, upload it to Facebook, put the captions in, and it takes like 3 hours and before you get it, you're done. And it's.
Yeah.
But I can tell you this, Dewald, I don't think painting your office would first of all expand your mind as much and bring you so much interesting. I think the biggest lesson, if you want to learn a lesson from this lockdown, is how resourceful you actually are and how much you can do.
I mean, look at that. Hey?
Clifford, bake that.
Isn't that a class A baguette?
So it is amazing how much you can do, and you've now taught yourself a skill, many skills that you might do for a client in 6 months' time. We've had, for the first time this week, had to quote on a project that is something that's only developed in the last 3 weeks, but with a Zoom content. And you think, if we had the attitude of, that's not really what we do, and strictly speaking, then you stay behind. And I think that's for the photography that you said as well. You need to look at how you can do it differently. But what I find interesting is, I think the old saying, if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I do think, and this is a personal opinion, I do think you must stick with what you like and where your interests are. I'm not suddenly going to become the best engineer or motor mechanic. I write about what I enjoy, and now that I can't travel, and unfortunately we can open our liquor cabinet and look at all the places we've been, but I can't travel at the moment, but I can do things around my travel love, which is actually a wonderful way of reliving it again. And
yeah.
Right, so let's chat about all those lovely condiments in front of you.
So we were talking about how we're going to, what is this talk going to be about and how this is going to be structured. So we thought, okay, well, we're going to start off with maybe a little bit of an introduction, just to kind of put people in the picture and why it's of interest, and why specifically us, what our backgrounds are, interest in the liquor.
Yes.
And then some, expand from there on some of the distilleries, the interesting places, because after all, you kind of follow your interests. So you start visiting interesting, you go to places because there's a specific thing there that you're interested in. And that takes you, into some crazy places. So that I think that the thing to start off with is to explain it. I think people need to understand that brewing and distilling are two very different things. I often get the question, people talk about, oh, you're going to be brewing again at home, or you're going, they associate it's the same process, but it's two very different processes. So brewing is normally associated with beer.
Yeah.
And distillation is production of alcoholic spirits, which is your whiskeys, your brandies, your vodka.
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A, B, C, D. And the fascinating thing, when you start kind of deep diving into the topic, is the discovery of, obviously, brewing is older than what distillation is, but distillation has been around since the 500s. Originally conceived by the Greek philosophers. They were talking about this ability of or they were theorizing about elements changing form. And it was, in fact, the Islamic scientists that came up with putting distillation to work, that actually devised the alembic still. The alembic still, the al is an Arabic derivation. So, and alcohol is an Islamic derivation, which is really interesting if you think about Islamic religion now versus, this association with alcohol.
But they did it for medicinal purposes.
So initially, yes, it was done for medicinal purposes, for extracting oils and all kinds of things. But essentially, distillation came from them.
Okay.
So yeah, from there it's spread around the world, and it is an absolutely fascinating history. There are all kinds of history books that have been written about the social history of alcohol around the world and the effects in different countries. Lots of wonderful stories. But I think for our purposes, and what's really interesting for as a South African is that while we make all kinds of spirits in South Africa, brandy is really our thing. That brandy was basically the first distilled spirit that you could get here. It was it was brought obviously by the Dutch when they arrived. And they distilled some grapes, and the first brandy was made then, but it was pretty poor stuff. And since then, it's become tradition. I've actually one of the books I've got, which is quite interesting, is called Volksgeneeskunst.
Okay.
Volksgeneeskunst in Suid-Afrika, 'n uitgebreide versameling boererate. And there are thousands. It's basically just recipes of lists of boererate, and it makes for fascinating reading. But it's incredible to see how many of these actually include brandy as part of the solution.
Okay.
So don't say brandy can't solve any problems. The old people believed it did.
But I think what is interesting with the brandy is the last couple of years, South African brandy even won the international prizes over cognac, which is fantastic that a little country like ours is making waves in the international market, and that people know there are fantastic brandy producers. And usually in the past it was the big corporations, but now little ones are starting all over the country, which is in itself a fantastic trip to take if you want to travel locally.
I mean,
and
sorry, you want to, yes.
The difference between cognac and brandy is the name.
That is, yes, essentially, you're right. I mean, that's a very short answer.
It's like TC here by us again.
The thing is, they're both made out of grapes.
Yeah.
But we generally have, the standards we have in South Africa are stricter than what they have in cognac.
Okay.
Cognac's just been around for a lot longer, and they've kind of, they've created this geographic thing like champagne and so on. So you can't call anything else cognac. But brandy is essentially the same thing. But we, for example, the French only have to mature their cognac for a minimum of 2 years by law, whereas with South African brandy you have to mature at least 3 years, so it spends longer time in barrel.
Yes, and what people don't know often is that Witblitz, that is distilled from grapes, is the start of brandy. And
exactly.
And if you put it into a wood keg, the wood gives it the brandy flavors. It's not additives and stuff, but yet on the commercial level, I'm pretty sure that they do add caramels and all sorts of stuff to give it a different flavor and to produce a lot faster.
If they're caught out,
if there's a caramel is added for color only, so there's no, I mean, even the cheapest brands of brandy in South Africa are very strictly governed. I mean, you know, they will come down on your heart if you don't. To give you an example, if you can have a look at in the law what the rules governing what defines brandy, it's several pages long.
Okay.
If you're going to have a look at what defines vodka or what defines gin in South Africa, those pages, it's a few paragraphs. You know, it's a very distinctly shorter thing, but it's because brandy is a traditional South African drink. They've really gone out of their way to kind of protect that standard. So yeah, I mean, the flavor, just to come back to the flavor is coming from the wood, and you know, from there are traces obviously of the grape spirit coming through, the fruitiness of the grape spirit that retains, but it's a combination of all that.
And also also the toasting. So you get degrees of toasting the barrel, and how if you toast it longer, the flavor will be more intense. It will change from sweeter to more dark, woody. So it's a whole process. But I want to add to that, if you want to see the whole process displayed and explained very beautifully, the KWV House of Fire in Paarl does a fantastic tour, and they've got a beautiful old building where you can see since the grapes come in, the whole process. They even cut the sides off a barrel and they put brandy in there to show you how it changes color.
So they cut the sides off and they put glass on the two sides, so you can look straight through. And
you can also see how much, they call it the angel share, how much evaporates when it stays in for 3 years. So by the time you get something like this beautiful 15-year-old, I mean, it's been in a barrel for at least 15 years. And it's amazing to think that some of our gins in South Africa sell for more than our brandies, and gin doesn't go into a barrel at all. You distill it this morning and you sell it this afternoon.
What will happen if you do put gin in the barrel?
You get no, not that one. You get a barrel aged gin. It goes brown. It does get color, and I mean, obviously depending on how long you leave it in, but it does get. For a long time, it was illegal to actually make barrel aged gin. Oh. And until probably about 5 years ago, I think the law changed so that you were able to make a barrel aged gin. The problem is, for a lot of, it's an expensive process. Distilling and making brandy is expensive. You can imagine brandy lying in a barrel for 3 years. That's costing you money, and it's evaporating. You know, so a lot of distilleries make gin because that's cash. That's as soon as you've distilled, you put it in a bottle, you can sell it. And you know, it's only really fringe experimental guys that are going to put gin in a barrel, because it's going to just cost the money. I mean, the cost of a barrel these days is ridiculous with the exchange rates. So here's this is, for example, a barrel aged gin from Corsair Distillery in Nashville that they did, which is also practically empty, sadly.
But that's clear, did it have a color?
It does have a color.
It does have, yeah, it does have a slight honey, like a honey color, very light honey color.
In terms of taste, is it wildly different, or is it?
Oh, it's, yeah, it's, I love them. I mean, it's
But you will shoot them, you will sip them. You won't necessarily put a tonic with them. It's more a sipping gin then.
yeah.
Like a good brandy.
It's a lot, I suppose. I mean, that particular one is very floral. It's there's you know, you're picking up a lot of the spiciness from the barrels. They obviously use American oak barrels, whereas our brandies are probably, you know, Irish, old whiskey barrels, old sherry casks, and those kinds of things. So.
And can you do like what the guys are doing with the beers, is that they do wild fermentation in old Chardonnay barrels? Can you put just a distilled Witblits into an old Chardonnay barrel and age it that way? You could do it. I mean, what is legal and what is not legal is, you know, you'd have to go and study. But I mean, yeah, it's as experimental as anything else. You know, okay. I think that's the big thing with a lot of the spirits. If you're sitting with a base alcohol, you can pretty much turn it into anything. You know, people think you know, for example, vodka is made from potatoes. Yeah. Which is a complete fallacy. There are a few vodkas in the world that are still made from potatoes, but the vast majority of vodka sold in the world is actually made from wheat. Okay. Is it because it's more available and cheaper to produce? Cheaper and quicker, yeah. If you take that vodka and you stick it in a barrel, you're going to get whiskey. Yes. Yeah.
That's how it starts.
Yeah.
Okay. But whiskey and bourbon has got their own rules. We did I'm now going onto your subject, but we did the bourbon trail in America 8 years ago, where every distillery that you go to, you get a little passport, and every distillery you go to, you get a little chop. And everywhere they tell you, remember, there's a difference. Bourbon is this, whiskey is this. They are very adamant that everything is made according to a certain law, and that's what qualifies it as a specific category. So it's very interesting when you start going around, and then you realize when people say, "Are you going to brew some alcohol?" that you can understand why people at distilleries and breweries are so adamant to get the wording right, that we are talking about the right thing or the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, they are. I think just to come back to the local distilleries, there's some fantastic places to visit locally. You know, they are, well, we wrote down a few. Yeah, we were talking about the House of Fire, KWV. Sedgwick's Distillery that makes 3 ships in Wellington is fantastic. Really world-class experience that you can go and have there. You know, have a look at their whiskies, and then you get a whole lot of the small distilleries. Bezalel in Uppington. There's the Mas. Van Kakamas, that's in Kakamas in the Northern Cape. You get Groentime near Oudtshoorn, another fantastic little distillery.
But they make I think the nice thing with Groentime is they make a variety: brandies, ginger brandies, beautiful gins. They do agave product. They've really broadened their horizons since they started distilling.
Yeah, and obviously you've got the Inverroche, you know, one of the granddaddies of the distilling, which Inverroche, which is also made you know, they're making rum these days. This is a limestone, a 10-year-old rum, which is fantastic. There's Topanga rum. There's
what's that gentleman's name in Wellington?
Andy Watts, the distiller.
Yeah, he does brandies.
Die man met die Copeland.
No, not Copeland. Yeah,
the gold flakes.
Yes, Edmund.
Can I Google it for you?
Yeah, you drive up all the way into the farms at the back of Wellington, and he's got this little,
Yes.
and he's all this cobwebs.
Have you been there?
Been there, yeah.
It's a wonderful little, it's kind of wild, Edmund.
Give me a second. Give
Wellington.
me a second. I can only go as fast as Google wants me to go.
Upland. Upland Organic Estate.
Yes, yes.
That's fabulous. I don't think he does a lot of public visits. Did you go there as like on a job, or did you go there?
Went on a job for the Maryke magazine.
Okay, so he's fantastic.
It was very nice that trip.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful how you know, even Boerplaas in Carletsdorp, everybody is now getting the feel and the history behind having an experience. So you can go basically to any of these local producers, and they have some kind of offering, whether it's go and look at the still, or whether it's doing a tasting with a couple of food pairings. And I think having a story and an experience is such an integral part, because every time you open a bottle, you are right back there. And if I look, for instance, if I don't know if you can see this one. Ooh.
So that's Highveld gin.
Yeah.
So we went to, last year we went to Chrissy's Meer, which is sort of between Kruger National Park on the way back to Johannesburg. And Chrissy's Meer is as big as your garage. It's unbelievable, this small little town, but it is historic because it was en route to the gold fields in the 1890s, 1885. And we found this little stone building, and the huge sign saying the gin shop. And we pulled in there on a Sunday afternoon when, you know, Chrissy's Meer started sleeping on Saturday. So the fact that something is open in their cars was quite an interesting thing. And we walk in and we meet this wonderful young girl. She looked younger than she actually was, but with dreadlocks and very enthusiastic. And we said, hello, are you still open? Can we taste some of your gin? And she said, yeah, sure. What do you want to taste? And she went through this whole process. And after a while, I said to her, so who is the distiller here? And she said, I am.
Okay.
And this girl studied, and she decided to come back to Chrissy's Meer, to go back to the old.
She's a biochemist.
Biochemist. And she came back to this little gin shop. It was an old traditional medicinal stop for the people going to the goldfields, where they would buy their gin for their health. So she just took this tradition 130 years later and reopened it. And this gin, she plays with what she can find, and she forages in the surrounding area. And she says some morning she gets to the shop and somebody put a basket full of lemons down, or somebody put pomegranates down. And then that day she experiments with that. And I mean, we went back 2 or 3 times, and you just sit there the whole day, because she's so enthusiastic, and her little still is in an old horse stable. Very interesting experience if you ever get to Chrissy's Meer.
Definitely keep that in mind for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the South African palate has changed quite a bit, because everybody was used to Wellington brandy and Russian beer vodka and what's that other Cape Rio. People were used to those kind of things. They were used to Castle and Black Label and Amstel, and then all these things started popping up. And I think that's what has changed what people want. So there's a little business for each and every one of them. Not now, but
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think, yeah, maybe not now, but
it's a good time to do your research.
Yeah. Thank you.
I
wanted to say a bottle of brandy is now, the price has gone through the roof, if you can find it.
You can come to our shop. We'll give you special price. No, I think for us, and you know, for us, it's always about travel. Every one of the bottles you see in front of us is a little bit of what we experience. And we've started when we visit a new city or a new town anywhere in the world. We always look for nice bakeries, and we always look for interesting stores, and always a distillery. We have been to amazing breweries as well, but I think our love and passion and preference is with the liquors. I'm more of a gin lover than Clifford is, but Clifford has got, yeah, he's got a different interest than me. The gins for me has taken me to amazing places. I'm one of my favorites, which is unfortunately, if you'll see, it's not with us anymore. That is a beautiful gin that we found in New Orleans last year. And it's a old 212-year-old building that they've made this distillery and restaurant. And I think what the fact that we got from the old town, the French Quarter, on a tram that long ago should have been on a scrap heap, but it's so beautiful, and it's got a little whistle and a bell, and it's beautiful. And then you get to this beautiful modern industrial look distillery with a restaurant in front. And
so it's like a warehouse, but the third of it has been closed off with glass, and behind the glass is this huge, still, and the rest is the restaurant. So you sit there and you look at the distillery. It's a bit like the Wilderer distillery at Spice Route. They've done a similar thing.
But the thing is, what I found is, it's even if you arrive somewhere unannounced or out of the time that they offer tours, most of the places where we sometimes stumble upon when you get to a city or a town, we went to the bar and we said, oh my goodness, we're from South Africa, we love gin. And the waitress said, oh, do you want to meet the distiller? And okay. And it was not a time when they did tours. That at that stage didn't even do tours. And you go to the back and he just wants to show you everything.
Yeah.
So every time you have a glass or a drink at home, you back right there. And I think now, especially that we can't travel, it's quite lovely to have all these memories. So Lula was one of my favorites, other than Highlands Gin, which I loved. And I think the fact that a young girl is doing it. But one of the things that I think people can learn a lot from, and I'm asked Clifford to show you that, is
anything in there?
Yeah.
That's
Bombay Sapphire.
So this is a candle.
That's how they diversify.
It's supposed to smell like gin. I don't know if it is. It's a Bombay Sapphire. Because you can't buy Bombay Sapphire, it's just too expensive in the UK.
But Bombay Sapphire is got their distillery just outside of Laverstoke, and it's southwest of London. And we did a trip there with my sister-in-law Katie and her husband Denny. And Denny doesn't drink hard liquor, so he was like, oh yeah, I'll go along for the ride. But he loves photography, and he just shooting on his iPhone, and we all went there and booked our space. And when you get to Bombay Sapphire, they've got the old 200-year-old red brick buildings of the old factory that they moved into a couple of years ago. But they built a beautiful glass conservatory, and all the botanicals that you find in their gin is grown there as in sample. Obviously, they can't grow the quantities they want. And then after you've tasted and smelled and touched everything, you go inside, and they've got little drawers with all the components in their gin. Obviously, they don't tell you the recipe and the percentages, but then you smell and bite and just touch and decide what you like, and you write down your 5 favorites on a little thing they call that's a flavor wheel that you look at. And then at the end of your tour, that's the drink you get. So if you said, I like the nachi, or I like the lime, and I like the cinnamon, that is the cocktail that you're getting. And I found that it just made the experience so much better, because a lot of people will say, oh, do you taste the citrus in this? And you think, no, not really. But now the fact that you could taste it and then experience it in a drink was quite a novelty for me. And I thought, if more people, more distilleries can have that kind of experience to make it tangible for the visitor. And I mean, you can't leave there without buying something. I bought a candle because, as Clifford says, it's too expensive to bring the alcohol home. But the candle is here and it smells of citrus. So they've used some of the botanicals of their gin they've made into a little candle. So one day when I burn that, I will have my Bombay Sapphire experience all over again.
But okay, and obviously in the times we are in now, a lot of people are home brewing pineapple beer. And I've seen some videos on Facebook with these things exploding, and it's stupidly funny, but it is so stupid they should have known that's going to happen. Anyway,
Yeah.
but thinking of that now, apart from the beer aspect of that, if you distill that's whatever is left there, you should get some really potent stuff that shouldn't taste too bad.
You mean if you distill this again?
No, the pineapple beer, for
Oh,
instance.
the pineapple beer.
What comes out of it,
The-
the
yeah.
juice.
Well, look, making beer is essentially the first step of distillation. So
Yes.
what you're doing is you're fermenting something,
Yes.
and where the beer guys then add hops, and it goes into bottles and kegs and what have you. The distillers take that product, and then that is fermented. So it's essentially a fermented beer. They stick in the still, and they distill that, and the alcohol comes off. So yeah, I mean there's a. I'm trying to think of the name of the agricultural showground up in Silverton in Pretoria. There's this grand distilling tradition in South Africa that we still have to write a book about. Kind of the Prohibition era,
Yeah.
illegal bootlegs distillers. In what's the area? Oh, my
Herman
goodness.
Charles Bosman country.
The name of the river. Anyway, so there are these guys. So in Pretoria, there's a agricultural showground in Silverton, Prinsloo, the something Prinsloo Saal, where they have a show every year religiously, and these guys turn out their huge beards, and they crawl out of the bush and the woodwork, and they have these incredible concoctions, and a lot of them is stuff that is pineapple, distilled pineapples and lychees and
Peaches, a lot of peaches.
you'll find so something I actually found in Berlin was quinces that you can that are distilled. The problem with the quince is it hasn't got a lot of juice in it.
Yeah.
But you can distill it.
A lot of sugar with that. It generally tastes nice. So I can imagine.
Yeah. So that's the thing. I suppose the yeast eats the sugar, and that's what produces the alcohol. The byproduct of that process is then the alcohol.
But the thing is, when you get the alcohol, it's 80%. It's 80% strong, and you've got to dilute it. And sometimes even if you dilute it, it still doesn't taste nice. But I think desperate times calls for desperate measures.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We went to a farm about 7 years ago. Karen was just pregnant with Emily, and this guy, he's retired. He lives at the foot of the Swartberg Mountains outside Calitzdorp, and he lives off he's got a couple of sheep and a couple of pigs, and he lives off the land, and he distills Mampoer there, and we tasted a whole bunch of them that night. And on his farm was a particular type of buchu that grows up and he had this thing analyzed, and he found that it was only on his farm where it's like a rugby field sized patch where this particular one grows. But it's got and I'm not a licorice fan, but it's got the most amazing licorice flavor, and that he infused his Mampoer with that stuff. He would distill a normal peach one or apricot one, and he'll stick a twig of that stuff in the bottle. And then he also did a Mampoer with figs, like groenvye.
Yes.
That was amazing.
Sure. Yeah, but see, that's innovation. It's innovation, and it opens up a product to more people that would usually say, no, I'm not going to touch Mampoer. But suddenly, if you have that chilled over ice cream, then suddenly it's something different.
Yeah. I think, you were talking about how people's palates have changed. I think there's definitely a move towards alcohol awareness, especially with the law about to change where you're going to be allowed 0% alcohol in your bloodstream. I think that comes in June.
Do you think we'll be able to drink by June?
Yeah.
Drink and drive.
So I think people are very aware. So so they're very particular about how they're going to consume spirits and what they're going to consume, because you decide, if I'm going to commit to this, I'm going to drink this, I'm not going to drink a lot of it, and I'm going to savor it. And in my experience, there's a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, alcohol production, beer and spirits is like, it's like being in a laboratory. You can do all kinds of interesting and fantastic things, and you can make it. So you can take a normal bottle of vodka and stick twigs of rosemary in there, and you'll have a rosemary vodka. I mean, it's amazing to have in your house.
Yeah.
But whether that's going to be the bottle of stuff that you take to sit on your stoop and sip is a different story. And that's when you start realizing that what a lot of these guys, I mean, people like KWV and Boerplaas that have been doing it have been distilling for decades and centuries, some of them. I think Boerplaas started in 1880 in Karlsdorp. They have it down. They've really created a product that is really, really good. It's and it's refined and it's palatable, and it's really something that you can sit and enjoy. Whereas, not everything is like that. Not just, people aren't just drinking it because it's alcohol, but because there's something really good about it.
And when you start deciding, and that's why some of the gins that I brought here, like the Lula, or in Houston, Texas, I bought a bottle of Lone Star gin. It is, I think a lot of people have said it over the last 4 or 5 years with the gin craze in South Africa, is that there will definitely be a lot of people keeping on drinking gin, because gin in the past was a female drink, and now it's everybody's drink. And a lot of people are having a gin and tonic, but for instance, when they arrive at guests, other than a brandy and coke or rum or whatever they drank in the past. But I think what we will see is that the quality guys will persevere. I think, and especially after a thing like a lockdown, people are going to be very pick and choosy with where they spend their money. And if I have to choose, if I've got 600 Rand and you want to charge me 600 Rand for a gin, that a lot of the local gins have been made hastily and they're not smooth and round and soft, people are going to stop buying that. I think we are, and especially since the craze has been around for a couple of years, people have tasted through the spectrum. And I think more and more you'll see the same labels in people's houses, because they've sifted and their money will speak in the end. So I think what is interesting, I like gin, which I said earlier, you distill this morning, you sell this afternoon, but there's still an art to that, to a good gin. Clifford's love is brandy. I mean, obviously you can't compare a 15-year-old Cave Vier or a Van Rijns, they're the world winners, with a gin that was distilled once and immediately into a bottle. But I think if you can make a gin beautiful, then that's also a beautiful art. There's a huge difference, but I think a lot of people must learn, or will learn, I think, that if you don't put effort in, and if you just are going for volume, people are going to stop buying it.
So what triggered the love you guys have got for this kind of stuff? What triggered it? Because apart from it tastes great and everything, both of you, you like a Stretton's gin and a Wellington brandy until you figured out something else.
I think, look, out of the nature of our work, we do a lot of writing about wine. But I started writing specifically about the liquor industry in around 2000, but intensely. I was working on several guides that, every year there were annuals about what brands were doing, and but it was specifically aimed at their marketing processes and so on. So that's where it started. I think it's just something that over time, as you write about it and you meet the people behind it,
I wanted to say,
you start getting really interested, and you start seeing what was fascinating to me is that it feels that, distillery has got a bit of a steampunk feel to it. It has it's this big brass animal that's standing in a corner. It is like an animal, you know, it's like this, you know, it's a bit dangerous, you know, nobody's really sure what it's all about, and it gets hot and steamy, and the distillers are occasionally a bit like brewers as well, kind of slightly crazy people, especially the smaller distilleries, you know, not the refined corporate guys. They're really experimental, you know, they always got something's going on somewhere. They're a bit like the brewers. And you know, as you go along, you start reading, and then you start expanding your knowledge through, and it expands through the history of alcohol, and you realize how pervasive it is in our society, how in our global society, and you know, it's caused some, you know, it's been at the heart of so many wars, and I mean, one of the things that was really interesting for me to discover a while back was that the gin craze in the UK, when England, and I'm talking, when I don't even know where the gin craze was. It was the 1700s, 1800s, but it was bad. Everyone was just distilling, you know, in their bathtub gin. That's where the term bathtub gin came from, and it's because of the Dutch. The Prince of Orange he used to rule part of England, part of the UK at that time, and he had a problem with an oversupply of grain, an oversupply of wheat. So he had to get rid of this, and the only way he could get rid of it quickly was to decrease the costs, the taxes and things on it. So it made it absolutely cheap for people to make and to kind of take. So they got rid of the surplus within, you know, very, very quick. But the problem is it caused this massive problem of, you know, alcoholism and just families decimated and cost lives. And it was an incredible thing. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just such a fascinating subject, and how that also ties into your tax system. You know, the tax management around alcohol, the whole prohibition era in the States is really, really interesting. And I mean, it's just waiting for some, you know, to get their hands into to write something about it.
But I think you've touched on it, is the people. I mean, every one of the people that we've met across the world is in some way a pioneer and a rebel. There's always somebody who says, yeah, the manager of the farm or the owner of the farm or my wife said you're crazy doing this, and how can you distill this, and how can you ferment this? And, you know, amazing stuff gets out after a couple of months or a year or whatever, and they come out and you think, how can they say this is crazy? I mean, this is amazing. So I think the people behind it is one of the things where our love for it expanded. And sometimes the most unexpected things happen.
And it's sorry, I just want to say it's not a love necessarily for the product.
Okay.
Because I mean, I find it very interesting and so on, but you don't have to be an alcoholic to be interested in liquor. So I think that's, and you know, alcohol is a dangerous substance. That's the one thing that has to be said. It's a dangerous, very dangerous substance. And yeah, if you're looking to put this out anywhere, you know, you need to consume responsibly.
Yeah.
And that is very real, because you know, there's all this talk around alcohol in South Africa now, and why we can't sell alcohol, and you know, the fact that hospitals are, the pressure on hospitals is so much less now because people aren't getting drunk and stabbing each other and shooting each other and so on. I mean, that's a very real thing, a very real issue. But sorry, yes.
No. So just to add to that, if you think this beautiful bottle of Corsair we bought in 2012, April 2012. So I think it's become a bit of a habit. When we go somewhere, we buy a beautiful bottle of alcohol, not necessarily to drink. We, of course, will drink it, but if you don't have if friends come and visit, it's not general that somebody would say, "Hi, do you have a nice aged gin?" You know,
Yeah.
the people's tastes are generally something different. But in any case, we've got them. But what I wanted to say about the personalities, 2 years ago, we were invited to a whiskey tasting in Cape Town. And as these things go, we arrive there, 20 people at the Bascule Bar in the waterfront, and we meet the distiller of the Paul John whiskey in India.
Okay. It's a Paul John single malt whiskey distillery in India.
And you taste the whiskey, and it's phenomenal stuff. And they, at that stage, made one specifically for Christmas for South Africa. And you know, now the little seed is planted. We've always wanted to go to India, and now there's whiskey in India. And I mean, it competes with the best in the world. It's won numerous prizes, and it's unbelievable. So last year, April, which is why I mention it, because the memories come up on Facebook. A year ago, we sat in Goa in India, where they just opened their visitor center. And it's the first whiskey visitor center of its kind, distillery in India.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful Portuguese architecture that they built this place in. And we couldn't fit the wall with all the awards onto one photograph. You know, it's just going. And you think that visit started with meeting the distiller, which is an interesting way of discovering something new, is because the person was so interesting and his passion for his product was so amazing. So that has taken us all over the world, following the people sometimes and not necessarily the product.
Very interesting. Not a bad way to make a living.
I didn't say we make a living like it. It's a bit like stamp collecting.
But you can't eat the stamps. We can really go get into this if we have to.
But Clifford, have you tried making your own stuff? I know that you tinker around with all sorts of funny things. Have you tried making your own?
I have got a license to distill. There's a license available for small scale distillation, which was specifically brought in to allow kind of research. If you want to start up a distilling business, they needed to give, the law said you can only get your license once you're up and running. But you know, I'm not going to, basically I have to equip my entire distillery for hundreds of thousands of rand without having even tested any product and knowing what I want to make. So they created this license so you can distill at home, but it's a bit of a process getting it. You know, the applications and the documentation as things are in South Africa. So So I've messed around in the laboratory making rums, and I've got a brandy maturing, and I've made gin, so yeah. But I must say, there's a company in Johannesburg called Distillery, which does a lot of installations, which has been helping a lot of these small distilleries set up and helping them put in stills. And they do a lot of courses, and I think they present a lot of their courses in the Cape as well. So so they do basic distillation courses. They do, so anybody can go and learn how to kind of make their own gin. You can leave at the end of the day with your own gin, and it's a lot of fun. Distillery, yeah. Okay.
And what is the basis of the gin that gets distilled? How do you make that?
So a lot of gin, and I'll probably say probably almost all the gin that we get in the Cape is made with grapes.
Okay.
So that's the base, the base of that. That's the base spirit. Now the one requirement for a gin to be a gin, like brandy needs to be, grapes, has to be made grapes, has to mature for 3 years. The one requirement that you need for a gin to be a gin is that there needs to be a noticeable taste of juniper berries.
Okay.
So you can do all kinds of other stuff in there, but you have to be able to pick up. So this is from a commercial aspect. So if you're planning to sell a gin, you need to submit it to the respective government department. They will test it, and if they pick up, okay, they're happy that they can pick up the juniper berry, then you can put gin on your gin on your bottle. Otherwise, you have to call it something else. You know, kind of some. The problem is that people don't buy kind of generic, funny alcohol things. They want to buy gin or brandy or whiskey.
Yes.
So that, I mean, that's the thing. So there are various ways of going about making it. You could buy the alcohol, the base spirit, from a bigger distillery, which is probably easier because, you know, if you're going to start with a fermentation process right to the end, there's a whole lot of variables in there. I mean, fermentation is chemistry by itself, you know. So you have to be a really good specialist. So I tend to get a hold of the alcohol, and then I distill. So you can either then collect your botanicals. You choose your botanicals. It could be lemon peel and, you know, obviously the juniper berries, and you can put it in a little basket or a muslin cloth, and you suspend it above the spirit, and that distills through the alcohol goes through the botanicals, and that picks up the flavor. Or what I think is a much better way is that you distill a specific botanical. So you distill several botanicals, but separately. So you do juniper berry, ginger root, cinnamon, you know, whatever. And then from that, you take all your bottles, and then you've got a more consistent measure of your recipe.
Okay.
Rather than, you know, I mean, how do you judge weight of, you know, 20 juniper berries? You don't know how much oil is actually in that juniper berry. Fresh juniper berries have got more oil than dry juniper berries. So it's such an inconsistent thing.
But what is interesting, Clifford did this test last year where he did a cinnamon gin and a licorice root and a citrus peel, and it was amazing. Before he made a gin with various botanicals, we gave it to our friends and we said, "Oh, what do you think of this?" And it was amazing to see the different opinions. And then you realize some people like it overly citrusy, other people like it overly gingery. And that was quite interesting when you realize you can use only one botanical with the juniper berries, or you can use 25 botanicals like some gin guys do. But that was interesting to see how, as Clifford says, how you can then make a blend and you've got much more control. But even the single components, how the simplest gins with just cinnamon was one of the favorites, for instance.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. So, what's on the cards for when lockdown is over in terms of your travel alcohol?
Well, we were supposed to be in Scotland now on a whiskey tour, and obviously lockdown changed that for us. So that is just being postponed. We heard from our travel agent yesterday to say your money is coming, just be patient. So as soon as we have a better idea of what's going on, I think we had this discussion this week. How is travel going to look? You know, when will it be safe to go on an aeroplane, and when will another country accept us? So I think it's in Afrikaans we use the langebaanskuif, and I think that is exactly what we've had to do. You have to focus on local stuff more now, I think, for the foreseeable future, and then we'll have to see by the end of the year where and what.
Yeah, but I think it's like when South Africa was at all these what do you call it now, where we couldn't import stuff and export things, and back in the 80s and whatever, people had to just figure out to make something. Yeah, and I think that's going to happen now. People are going to start traveling locally. Local places will become cheaper because there's no dollars that's coming in to fund the high prices. And I think it's going to be, well, as I've said so many times before, it's once everything is over, we're going to sit with a level playing field in every single industry. So then it will be interesting to see what's going to happen.
That's very true. I think we're going to start supplying in our own demand. I think when we had our chat, you and I, in the beginning of the lockdown, I just came back from a seminar that I attended by Lee Edelkoort, who's a trend forecaster. And that was the 29th of February, before we had any signs of COVID in South Africa or any talk of it. And she said there that the virus is horrendous. I mean, it's horrible what happens across the world. But the good thing about the virus is that it's forcing us to see how much we actually need on a daily basis. It will take away, for a long time, it will take away our consumerism attitude towards life. And for the first time in, I think she said 20 years, South African designers will have to clothe South African people. And if you think where we are now, you know, when China had to close their factories in December and January, that is when our winter clothes are made. So even if lockdown opens or we can go back to the shops, it'll be interesting to see what you can buy, because it'll probably be a year old, or it will have to be made local. So it will definitely have advantages, obviously, for a lot of people, like what the wine industry has been going through the last couple of weeks with exports. It'll have horrendous results for other people. But I do think it'll put us back, as you say, on a level playing field.
I think in terms of the wine exports, I know I asked if we can chat about it. You said it's a bit of a minefield. But I think a lot of the wineries are focusing on international guys or exporting. They obviously can't sell the stuff now. So the wine is sitting there in the tanks, and they must make plans with it. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting things coming from that again. That's going to hit the market. So you might not see your regular Sauvignon Blancs and Chenin Blancs and Cabernets and all the kind of stuff. People will then, because they're bored, they've got the stuff, they will start playing around with different blends, and I think it's going to be, that's also going to be interesting again.
Yeah. We must just get South Africans to start buying and paying for the quality that we have. If you go overseas and you see what a 200 Rand bottle of wine tastes like, some of it you won't even cook with. And then if you sell something here for 75 Rand, people complain. But you don't think about, you know, especially small batch or single vineyard varietals, what goes into that. And I mean, we all know the joke, how do you become a millionaire in the wine industry? You start with 10 million. That is a reality. And South Africans are the biggest complainers. We don't want to support our local wine industry. We will gladly pay 700 Rand for a bottle of gin. Yes, we can drink from it a couple of times, but a 200 Rand bottle of wine that is, you know, 10, 12 years old is just on a whole different level. Then we complain about that. So hopefully the South African community will also realize we have to help our wine farmers. They can't export and earn a living. We have to help, and I'll gladly help. So,
and guys that you've got a close connection with, are they seeing a light at the end of the tunnel in the foreseeable future?
I think when we know what the levels mean exactly, I think there's a lot of confusion about what it will mean exactly. I mean, I saw yesterday on Facebook, everybody interprets the levels and what will it mean for alcohol and where can it be sold and bought. As soon as that is sorted out, I think a lot of planning will be able to happen. But as Clifford said to me this morning, we discussed something else. This is a virus. There is no rule book that says in 2 weeks it's going to be over and we'll be fine. We'll have to play it by ear like we've been doing in the last 5 weeks. And I think there's a couple of difficult months ahead for us. So I think it'll develop week by week.
Yeah,
interesting.
I have to agree with it.
Oh, I'm glad.
Is there anything else you guys want to chat about? Because we've gone over an hour, and I know you said that you've got a couple of other things as well.
Oh,
yes.
That's wonderful. Yeah. No, thanks for the opportunity, man.
Yeah.
We love to chat about. We love to chat about these things. There's so much. Yeah.
I think I'm going to stop chatting now and rather
Start
drink
drinking.
some. Yeah, I'm very impressed with the variety, sir.
I've only got a bottle of Jane B whiskey, which is paint stripper in my personal opinion, and I've got some Three Ships whiskey, and then I've got expensive wine left, which I don't want to open actually, but that's all I've got left to drink. So,
Well, the Three Ships is amazing.
We actually, there's a story in Rapport today that I did about this exact subject, is how all the, I mean, this is your problem is everybody's problem. You know, we've all drunk the everyday wines, and now we're standing, you know, we're standing looking at the first line in our collections, and the collections are looking at us, you know, and you suddenly find, oh, I have to marinate something, and am I going to open this 2014 or 2012 bottle of Cabernet to marinate my steak with, you know? I don't know.
We had that dilemma last week, and we had to decide. And I told this story to somebody yesterday, and she said, no, in that case, you just leave the meat.
Yeah. Okay, guys, thank you so much. It was an awesome chat, like always, and hopefully we can do this in person soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tim.
It was nice to see you again, man. Yeah.
And cheers.
Cheers, man. I haven't got it.
You come unprepared.
Right. Have an awesome Sunday further on, and then I'll chat to you guys soon.
All right. Yeah, likewise. Thanks, man.
Bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.